Hello and welcome to Mind Shifters Radio. I'm Tim Hayes. I'm your host for the first hour. And today is Monday, September 29th, 2025. As always, we're grateful to everyone who's joining us here today, whether you're listening live or through the archives, as we spend another couple of hours teaching and supporting people in using some of the most powerful, effective, efficient, and accessible tools I've ever encountered. These tools are available absolutely free through the tireless efforts of Dr. Michael and Jeannie Ryce on the website at whyagain.org. If you go to that website and click on the two words that say Start Here in the upper left-hand corner, it will take you to a page where you can download and read Chapter 24 of Dr. Michael Ryce's book. His book is titled, Why Is This Happening to Me Again? And that chapter of the book contains a narrative description and explanation of the primary tool in this work. That tool is called the Reality Management Worksheet, sometimes called the Reality Management Wake-Up Sheet, and it's a tool I've been using to great effect for over 21 years now to improve the quality of my life and most of my relationships, and to turn any negative emotional experience I have into part of the infallible guidance system that each and every one of us has been given. You can also download the actual worksheet process itself. It's a simple PDF file. Click the link, download it, print it off, copy it as often as you'd like, and use it over and over again absolutely free. You can also download from that page a whole host of audio files of shows just like this one where people have been stepped through the worksheet process. And if you choose to listen to them even repeatedly, they can serve as a powerful tutorial for you to help you get maximum benefit from these tools in the shortest amount of time possible. You can also go to your app store. If you do that and type in the three words Heartland Aramaic Forgiveness, it will, before you're done typing the word forgiveness, you'll see the glowing heart icon. If you tap on that, it will let you download a completely free and private app that contains the Reality Management Worksheet, contains an abbreviated version of that worksheet process, and it contains a copy of the Dragon Klingon game, which is a wonderful way to introduce these tools to even younger audiences. We hope people do all of that soon and often, primarily because it tends to improve the quality of people's lives the more they actively apply these tools in their lives. And secondarily, because it tends to prompt comments, questions, answers, and testimonials. If you have any of those to share with us, we'd appreciate you doing so. You can email me at tjh@mindshifters-academy.org, or you can email Jeannie at jeanie@whyagain.org. That's whyagain.org. Or you can join us live. We're almost every Monday through Friday from 11 till noon Central Time. You can go to zoom.us and enter the meeting ID number 853-2357-4173. That's 853-2357-4173. That's also the number you would use if you called on your phone to one of the many numbers that Zoom provides. And then you can just toggle yourself on and off of mute with *6. So we have plenty of time for comments and questions and reports about weekend activities. We have been working our way into the book, the most recent book by Guy Finley, titled The Book of One Love, One Life, One Journey. It's Guy Finley with Dr. Ellen Dickstein. And before I get into that, I would just like to reiterate that at any point in time, even if I seem to be in the middle of something or on a roll, we encourage people to raise a hand or just unmute and speak up. And we want to reaffirm that we view that as an addition to whatever's happening, not an interruption or a distraction. So let's get back to the reading. The section we were reading, we didn't quite finish. It was about from self-sabotage to self-mastery, and different quotes from people in the past. Francois Fenelon and Kierkegaard and Chief Dan George and Albert Einstein. Chief Dan George was the one that said, I seek strength not to be better than my brother, but to fight my greatest enemy, myself. And so Guy Finley writes, to see that we are our own worst enemy is not a problem. In fact, it's the first step to becoming free of all enemies. If we imagine wrongly believed our worst enemy was actually our best friend, then we would be in a very vulnerable position, wouldn't we? But if we discovered that what we believed was our, quote, friend, close quotes, was actually the cause of all our pain, we could finally stop listening to that deceitful voice and enter a whole new world of possibility. So, in this situation, what he's referring to is how we have in our culture been trained to think that our thoughts are infallible and what we think is the truth, and we should use our intellectual capacity at every turn. But the problem is, it's a problem in your thought. It's your negative thoughts themselves that are causing your pain. They are, if they ever did serve as a useful, serve a useful service or fulfill a useful service, they don't anymore. And so it's like Michael Singer talks about in his book, Untethered. The whole first section of the book is all about how most of us have an abusive roommate living rent-free in our heads. And if we aren't willing to confront that, become consciously aware of it and confront it, we can't do anything with it. So imagine how our life would be if we wrongly believed that our worst enemy was actually our best friend. And we let them into our closest secrets, and we let them access to our passwords, and they were actually our enemy. We would be really, really open to disruption. But if we discovered that what we believed was our friend was actually the cause of all our pain, we could shut them out of our lives. We could quit sharing that stuff with them. We could spend our time with different people. Or, in this case, we could actually talk to the intrusive negative voice in our heads and make changes in its pattern. Guy goes on, in the still uncharted realms of mind and heart, there exist parts within every person that are drawn to seek out relationships with thoughts that are self-wrecking. For instance, we can often become transfixed with our own troubles, turning the image of some fear-producing picture over and over and over in our minds. And who hasn't found himself drawn into an argument where an antagonistic voice in his head is nothing other than his very own thoughts acting out the role of enemy? So he goes on. As these particular birds of a feather, these thoughts, the self-victimizing thoughts and feelings, they flock together. In the unaware mind, this continual process, which is driven along by the law of attraction, eventually gives shape to a form of psychic pathway, a kind of mental rut that ultimately expresses itself like this. In any psychologically challenging moment, not only is the direction we turn to meet it already carved out for us, But what we meet that moment with, in other words, which parts of ourselves take the lead, is also reached automatically. So, in a very real sense, our choices are made for us even before we know what they are. Now, that's the current situation. It's not what we're doomed to. It's not all that's possible. It's just what's happened by default from all of these different factors of our lives coming together. So he asks, have you seen this condition in yourself? The condition that in a given unwanted event, because of some unpleasant past personal experience with others like it, there's a certain part of yourself that rushes to the front and assumes command. In short, these reactions define the moment and then rule the direction of all those that follow, all those moments that follow in its breaking wake. So it creates disruption when you respond automatically from an old pattern. And this is a really good time to put in a plug for Michael Ryce's 3 Early Memories of Conflict exercise, because this is exactly what they're talking about here in the book of One Love, One Life, One Journey. These patterns, these response patterns, these patterns of interpretation, these defense patterns, they've been downloaded into us and pre-programmed, and so they kick in automatically. And if you look at the Michael Ryce's 3 Early Memories of Conflict, which is available off the whyagain.org website, that's WHYAGAIN.org, then work through that and you'll start to get some of your own individual insight into how these automatic patterns that you created somewhere between birth and 8 or 9 or 10 years old are still running your life today. Despite the fact that you might have other far more adaptive and effective options or choices available to you, if that auto process kicks in, you don't have the choice. So Guy goes on. For example, maybe someone makes a cutting remark towards you, or some pending news comes along concerning a possible loss of one nature or another. Doesn't it feel in these unwanted moments as though you're suddenly caught in a kind of a gravitational field? As if something is literally pulling you within you, compelling you to seek out that part of yourself that's best able to consider your new condition? It is this exact inner moment, operating under the law of attraction, that is the real event responsible for the onset of your stressed states. In and of themselves, these life events that we label as, quote, scary, close quotes, are as powerless to punish us as is a make-believe monster in the movie screen. For just as we must, quote, give, close quotes, ourselves over to the reality of the motion picture before we start to feel the fear it intends to raise in us, the same process has to happen when it comes to our stressed moments. In front of these familiar shakings and their aching can begin, before that happens, we must be tricked into believing that what we're being given to see is the reality of our lives, is indeed, it's all there is that we can see about our lives in that moment. So in other words, our view gets myopic, it gets hyper-focused and tiny. And we're tricked into believing that whatever we're seeing in the moment is the whole truth of all that is. Last paragraph in this section reads, when we see only our real ideas about why we're feeling stressed, and they're telling us how we're entitled to be miserable, then misery makes up the circle of our lives. But when we actually see within ourselves that misery loves company and that we've become its closest friend, well, now we're well on our way to making a new and true friend. Now we're on our way to establishing a new relationship with life based in a reality that will not only give us a whole new experience of life, but if this friendship is made fast and strong, we'll come upon a whole new self within ourselves that never feels despair or defeat. Imagine that there's a self within you right now that never feels despair or defeat. There's just something about that that puts me in mind of a podcast I listened to on Friday as I was driving. I listened to the podcast from Roger McFillin. He has a podcast titled Radically Genuine. And I hadn't planned on talking about this, but there's just something about what I just read there in Guy Finley's book that has me wanting to share this. So 4 days ago, episode number 202 on the Radically Genuine podcast from Roger McFillin. And the title of it is The Session That Made Me Question Everything I Know About Healing. Wouldn't it be good if I could tell you why I just mentioned that? So somewhere along the line here, something I just read had me think of that. Yeah, you know, Roger's a young psychologist who very bright intellectually and has been really focused on if you can't see it and measure it, then it's not real. And it reminds me of the kind of position of somebody like Eben Alexander, who was a neurosurgeon who used to believe that human consciousness was simply the byproduct of random neural firings and nothing more, that we didn't have a soul and that there isn't anything after this life, etc. And then he had his near-death experience. Michael Ryce would call it a near-life experience, where he was in a coma, but the coma was not medically induced. The coma was induced from the infection in his brain, the meningitis. And so bacterial or whatever it was. So the end result was he had an experience of 7 or 9 days, I forget how many days he was in a coma, where he had a full depth, in-depth, detailed life experience, and he had knowledge of what went on in the hospital around him, and not even in the room he was in, but in other rooms in the hospital, while he was clinically brain dead for days. And that helped him reassess what he thought. Hey, I just thought if we can't see it and measure it, it's not real. Hey, I just thought that human consciousness is the byproduct of random neural firings. Well, Roger McFillin had a session where, despite the fact that he has spent years building his reputation on being, using only scientifically proven techniques, etc., and if you can't see it and measure it, it's not real, kind of an approach to life. And he got the doors blown off the car on the highway at 70 or 80 miles an hour. And he came to realize, I can't deny this. There's something going on here that has nothing to do with logic. It has nothing to do with the five senses. So I can recommend the podcast simply because so much of what Roger McFillin is coming to in these realizations is just like what Michael Ryce teaches, the whole thing about hold a newborn and your essence is love and your light shining brighter, the more you do your work, etc., the more you understand your thoughts are false. All of that is in the podcast with Roger McFillin. Um, and, it's, we can only hope that for Roger and everybody that he works with, that that's not a one-off thing, that the way his life experience pushed him into awareness of the kinds of things that Dr. Michael Ryce teaches and all these great spiritual teachings have at their core, we can hope that it lasts for him and that it becomes the norm. So we have plenty of time for comments or questions before I get back to reading, if I continue to read from the book of One Love, One Life, One Journey by Guy Finley with Dr. Ellen Dickstein. So I'll take a breath and take a sip and wait to see if somebody wants to unmute or raise a hand or ask a question or type something in the chat room.
Hi, Dr. Tim. I'll go ahead and say hello. I'm Sean. Hello, everyone.
Hello,
And
Sean.
finally getting a chance to make the time to come and say hi to you. I know we've chatted here and there in the past, but I'm on vacation for a couple of days, so I got some time to hang out with you guys.
Excellent.
Yeah. I appreciate your work. Jeannie's been putting up your show along with the Why Again show also, and I'm one of them that's doing the conversions from MP3 to MP4
Thank
and
you
getting
for
them
that.
put up for sure, and getting them put up. So I have the unique privilege of hearing a lot of your old shows too, and going through them and hearing them. And I appreciate your consistency through the years.
Well, I'm glad you're finding it useful.
For sure.
We like to just keep bringing people back to the idea that the point of this work is the work and the
Right.
application of the tools, right? The actual, when I move myself to the place where the things that used to help me have a meltdown 10 years ago are now things I chuckle at.
Right.
I know I've got good tools and I'm using them, but if I feel like I'm still stuck in the same place I was 10 years ago, this body of work would recommend that I either find some different tools or actually start using the tools differently.
Right. Yep.
So where are you located, Sean?
I am in Baton Rouge, Louisiana.
So how'd you get involved in this work and the assist you're being to Michael and Jeannie?
That's a great question. How much time do you have? Um, so I'll give you a Cliff Notes overview if you would like. So uh, growing up, got to high school, had an excellent English teacher who, I mean, he might as well join us, right? But he has since expired because he would understand this work, I think. But in public school, you always have to be careful about what you say, how you say it to the students, because you literally don't know who you have in class. You don't know what they bring into class, what they deal with. So you share the stories and you talk about it. And I always kind of liked that idea. There's just something about it that stuck out. Him and I, we remained friends well into his retirement, actually, also. So that was kind of neat. And I joined the Air Force. I went to England, got saved in a bus stop at the only four-way stop in all of UK on a military base. a guy handed me a gospel tract. It said, "When the Word became flesh." I looked at it and I said, "Okay, I know what this is." And I started to walk away. And he says, I was in the middle of the street, and this old guy at the time, right, retired, he says, "Oh, so you know him?" And I stopped dead in my tracks, and I turned around. It was a brand new thought, neural structure, right, happening. And I said, "I can know him." So that became my new career, seeking truth and wisdom and such. So I helped out a few churches along the way. You know, you soul win, you do the whole church thing, and ended up in Arkansas, and that was horrible. That's everything that you don't do in a church. So I got out of that, and I'm glad I did. I came to Baton Rouge for Bible college, actually, graduated, but there were still so many missing pieces. I had questions no one could answer. So I had stumbled across Jesse Lee Peterson, literally by accident, and then Roy Masters, and then Michael Ryce, and then you, and Bill Donahue, and a few others. And the culmination of that has allowed me a great privilege to see where different sources, where different works all fit together. So specifically Michael Ryce now, subsequently yourself as well, I was looking into the Aramaic. I wanted to know more about this Kaboris and about this technology of forgiveness and what love really is and the hard questions that churches just don't have the answer to. And I reached out a few years ago. You know, Jeannie would reply, and I'd listen to the radio show and go, okay, that's nice, that's unique, but you know, as the all would have it, I came circling back about a year and a half later, and I said, gee, it would be nice if somebody converted all these 2,000 plus something, 20,000 videos, you know, old radio shows into YouTube so the world can see this work because it's time. And a few months later, Jeannie made the offer, hey, would you be interested in volunteering? And I said yes. So I've been doing it a little bit over a year now. I wish I didn't have to work so I can get more work done. But that's in a nutshell how I came to be in this position. And thanks for the question.
Well, thanks for the detailed answer. So, have you ever um, participated in a support group or done a worksheet in a supportive atmosphere with other people, or?
Actually, last night I was on with a group, a William Donahue kind of fan group, sort of, and just to give you a brief background why I'm interested in that, he reinterprets a lot of the Old Testament stories and tells them from the perspective of the mind and how thoughts work and how the spirit works and where thoughts are from and different things like that. So I'm tying a lot of different things together. But I was on with them last night, and a couple of the participants had shared that they they couldn't meditate. They were dealing with visions of past traumas and things that were coming up. And I can hold my own for a lot of different things, help people through what inner forgiveness may look like for them and different things like that. But it was like, okay, I need to reach out to somebody. And I had sent a text to Michael and Jeannie, and then they had came on last night, and there was an absolutely beautiful event that happened. People that I didn't even know needed a healing. You know, they were going through the worksheet process as Michael was giving it. Um, and so, but locally, physically, there's a study group that myself and another gentleman had started up, and we're still on the topic of dealing with the armor of God. And Dr. Tim, let me tell you, if you don't know, dealing with religious people can be kind of rough. Um, they're not always willing to see it your way, but you have to have patience and you have to grow the brain cells and such. So to answer
Well,
your
and
question
and and
directly,
the let me just make a comment about that. When you say they don't see it your way or they don't want
right?
to see it your way, I would offer for your deep consideration that that's not the point
No,
of
it's
this
said tongue
work,
in cheek. Yes, that's correct. Yeah,
right? That the point is not for you to get people to see it your way. The point
right.
is for us to help people look inside themselves
Yes.
and connect to that which can teach them in ways none of us can teach
That I
each
can't.
other.
That's correct. Yeah. But I said that tongue in cheek, essentially, and so I figured you would catch that, pick up on that. So
Just trying to keep me on my toes. Okay, I get it.
no,
Okay.
but it's a blast. Let me tell you, you're right though, because it's kind of like the ultimate testing grounds or proving grounds. Do I do I really believe what I think I do if I go to set forth and offer some things up? And then if I get these challenges, how do I react? How do I respond? What would the correct thing be to say or do, on top of that? And so, but it's been an all around great process. There's a couple other online groups that I attend also that are phenomenal, that grow great because everyone is in more of a harmony and you can share more and more in depth. But the live, nobody knows this work. So you're literally in a grassroots movement in a sort of a way. You're literally building and allowing space for people um, to learn their own patience and to learn themselves, to learn that they have a self. You know? But it's been interesting. Another great question.
So the answer is you haven't actually done a worksheet in a supportive community setting.
No, not
Have you
no, not uh,
done many worksheets at all on your own?
for myself. Oh yeah. Yep. I've looked at it. There's magic that happens in there, to use the term in a specific way. It's like a slow motion view of what happens maybe during a silent prayer or a meditation, wordless observation event or exercise. But the work is vitally important. As I was sharing with Michael the other day, you can be connected with a lot of different groups, but this is the missing link that so many of them don't know about. And it's my personal belief that as we share with AI, as we share videos, as we share with what becoming conscious is, then the whole world heals together. Um, and I've seen that. I could testify, if you will, of different things, different events that have taken place over time. But no, in actually facilitating a worksheet step-by-step process,
Well, the reason I ask,
no.
and just to clarify, is that many people, when they come to the groups and they stay on a regular basis and they start doing
Mhm.
worksheets, many people come back and say, you know what? I get more out of these worksheets when I do them in the group.
Ah,
And we
yeah.
had one gentleman who actually said, he was in his 50s at the time, and he said, I don't know what it is, but I find myself being even more honest with myself in the worksheets I do in the group than I am
hmm
when I do them on my own at home.
it's a pacing. It causes you to pace yourself and have patience because the ego speaks first and then the spirit. hmm
So I just wondered if you'd had that experience firsthand. And since you haven't, I would just encourage you to look for a way to make that happen.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to try in our local group, I'm going to try to implement the Why Again book as a starting point. Um, because I think that's, that's a great starting point and vitally needed anyhow. And then from there we can deal with, a worksheet process and such. But I'd love to take a whole group through a worksheet process. I'm not that expert in it yet. I can use it, but to lead an entire group in it, we're not ready for that yet. Now, some of the online groups, we wouldn't have much of a problem understanding it. I'm in a Way of Mastery group on Facebook and a couple others. I just share where I can, and I don't know what necessarily drives that. Don't know if it's right. Don't know if it's wrong. It just is, if that makes any sense.
Gonna have to be okay if it is. It's
Yeah,
like the Byron Katie work, everything that's just happened is just perfect. How do I know that? Because it's already happened.
it is. Yes, sir.
I I have a thought. This is
Please.
Sally, and Sally has done a lot of worksheets on my own in my own space, in my own quietness, and I've noticed I've been hesitant to do a worksheet on myself with the group. And there's all these voices that say, I don't want to take up time. I'm not sure how long I have to be on this show to be eligible to jump in, and all these little choruses that I'm very used to. And today I had an experience. I lead a Course in Miracles meeting on every Monday morning at 10 a.m. And so when I say a lead, I just am the one that knows where we are in the book, and I think I've got the most longevity, so I'm the oldest, but I don't profess to lead. But today in the meeting, I shared honestly that I've had a headache from my experience of I I pay attention to what's happening in the world politically, economically, globally, how people are treating one another in a much larger scale than my own backyard. And I've had a headache for about 10 days, and I don't get headaches very often. And I don't medicate it, but I've done everything that I could think of, except for getting a massage. I've done as much as I could do to make this better, but every morning I wake up with this headache. So in the middle of the miracles group, the gal to my left, she puts her hand on my shoulders and she goes, "Oh, wow." And we just sat there with her hand on my shoulders. And she said, "There's a lot happening here." And I just smiled and I let myself receive, because my thinking mind kept going crazy. Like, how do I deal with this? What's this about? What am I supposed to do? And then before I could think too much, which is pretty much a miracle, I took the hand of the woman to my right, and pretty soon all the women in the circle had just linked hands. And we sat like that for about 30, maybe more like 3 minutes. I was going to say 30 seconds, but I think it was a lot longer. And by the time we released hands, everyone in the room had received a shift, and I had no more headache. And I have no headache now. And I was so stunned by that. I love when you were doing the reading, Tim, and you were talking about this person that thought, if you can't kick it, it's not real. If you can't measure it, it's not real. And I was laughing to myself. And then you were telling the story about eventually he had all the doors blown off his thought system because he had an experience. And so in light of this conversation, I just want to speak for the value and the power of sharing in a group what's really happening and being open to receive. And that's all I got to say about that.
Wonderful. Well, I've had those kinds of experiences. I know they happen on a regular basis, and they happen more when people soften and as the Way of Mastery would call us to in the fifth lesson, the keys to the kingdom are desire, intention, allowance, surrender, and humility. And so the desire thing is, can I learn to tune into this energy of creation that wants to express uniquely through me in this moment? And then the next one is, can I choose to untrain myself, retrain myself out of this habit of being able to be distracted? Because we are master distractors of ourselves and others. But then after I do that and I stay focused on that energy of intention or creation that wants to move through me, and I keep my attention focused on it, and then I just learn to allow whatever happens. I learn to scan for the earliest warning sign of tightness or tension anywhere in my body and just breathe and soften and release it. If I do those first three, the fifth lesson in the Way of Mastery tells us what's going to happen is my life is going to start shifting in such a way that I have this growing realization emerge in me that I'm not the one driving this. I didn't create myself. I don't know when I was created. I'm not keeping my heart beating. I'm not digesting my food. I'm not actually in here looking out. There's something is living me, breathing me, seeing through me. And that is what they term surrender. That process as it evolves, they call surrender in the lesson. And then they said, if you do those and let those things happen, what's going to follow is your life is going to start unfolding in ways that you prefer it so much that the temptation to claim credit for yourself is going to go through the roof. And that's where humility needs to come into play. We need to remember that we have the highest and best in us the same as everybody else does, and we don't have anything better than anybody else. We're not better or worse than anybody. The ancient Aramaic definition for humility has to do with this ability to look for and see the highest and best in another person, and then choose to cooperate only with that. So the softening, the allowing, the understanding, training myself to understand that my negative thoughts are never true. Just try and wake up to this. This is amazing. This is an amazing realization. And occasionally I run into people who've had it. Every time I'm upset, whatever my mind is telling me is a lie. It's a distortion, and at best, it's only partially true. Just that. If we could just train ourselves to remember that, it would transform our lives. And the stuff that happens, go ahead. Who wanted to talk? Is that Sean?
Yeah, I was just going to verify what you say. You say it exactly right. In the little study group, we've been doing a little work in perception of self. We've worked that into there, and these are foreign concepts to church people, but they show up, they come. And but yeah, you're right. I just wanted to appreciate what you said.
All right. Yeah, there's been a lot that's gone on here in the past 14 and a half years, pushing 15. And I mean by that I mean on the internet show and the work that individual people are doing to try to increase their individual awareness. And everybody's going to have to do what they feel is right. And yet, almost every time I hear people starting to talk about healing the planet or healing the world, or I think, oh, here's a person who probably hasn't completed their own work yet, since they still have a body, and they're running the old pattern of saying we have to save other people, we have to save the world. And the core of these, the best deep teachings I've ever read that resonate with me, the core of all of them say, just clean up your own house, right? Just once you do that, once you get clear that you're this energy of creation expressing in form, and you get clear that everybody you see is the same energy of creation expressing in form, then that means you've gotten enough of your garbage, your negative thoughts about yourself out of the way, and or you've retrained your brain to laugh at your negative thoughts rather than believe them. Then what starts to come out of you towards other people is just that pure energy. You don't need to worry about healing the planet, healing another person, etc., because you're already going to be bringing the most you possibly can to it. I remember one of those lines when we were doing some deep dives into the way of mastery. I don't know whether it was a darshan or one of the Q&As, but you know, it might be, and the essence of this might actually be in the way of mastery too, but the essence is you're trying really, really hard to heal somebody or to send this knowledge of their true nature as love to this person. You're trying to beam love to them. You're trying to get them to do worksheets or whatever it is. And you're wondering, you're frustrated, you're wondering why you're frustrated. This might have been an Abraham teaching, and Abraham says, listen, back up and look at the whole teaching. And the whole teaching says you cannot possibly be separated from your creator, that the actual essence of creation that gave rise to you is flowing through you and is responsible for your very existence. So there's never been a disconnect or separation. And that means that same thing is true for your fellow brother or sister that you're sitting here thinking, oh, I need to heal them or I need to help them feel better. And Abraham, I'm pretty sure now it's coming to me, it was Abraham said, the creative force itself is flowing through that person and giving them their very existence, closer to them than their own breath. What do you think you, with your dim little bulb over here, covered with all those bushel baskets, is going to do? If the actual flow of creative force itself can't override their choice. Just think about it. All of the stuff, it's like what we're reading here at the very end of the Guy Finley thing, you know, if you believe your negative thoughts, that's the same thing as inviting your worst enemy to be your best friend, mistaking your worst enemy as your best friend. And now you're believing your negative thoughts and you're creating misery in your life and wondering why. The way out, he says, is establishing a new relationship with life based in a reality. And here it would be, Dr. Michael Ryce would use the word actuality. Based in an actuality that will not only give us a whole new experience of life, but because we've made this solid friendship with it, we'll come upon a whole new part of ourselves that never feels despair or defeat. In other words, if we make friends with the true nature of us as human beings, with this capacity to presence love or extend love in the physical realm, or to be the extension of the creative force in the physical realm, we as humans have that capacity. If we can sink into that realization, we will never again believe our negative thoughts. We'll have them, they'll come up, But all these deep teachings say this in a variety of ways. Way of Mastery says it about anger and says, don't just stop rationalizing your anger. It doesn't mean you won't have anger. Just quit kidding yourself into thinking that it's justified. It's a warning system. It's not the arbiter of truth, right? Your anger is a product of a pain, a fear, or sadness inside of you, and your response to that, to numb out from it or distract from it or whatever. So we have a little bit of time left if anybody wants to comment or question. Sally, I'm just so thrilled that you had that experience, and I hope you continue to enjoy similar experiences the more you soften and let yourself be open in those community settings. I occasionally run into people who, after they've had an opening like that, they start to soften, and then they bump into a narcissist or two, or another similarly wounded person, and they're out there being wide open, and they start to feel, attacked or threatened or manipulated, and then they collapse in even harder. The way to keep coming back to that is to understand that the only thing that's feeling the pain is your ego, and the only thing that can be hurt in you is your ego. The idea is in the Course in Miracles, right? The very first line, it says, "Hey, what's real can't be hurt, and only love is real." So if you have hurt, it's an unnecessary creation. And as we're just reading up from the guy Finley, Sean was asking, can you post a link? I don't know what link Sean wanted. So he says, can you post the link? I'd like a place to ask questions on A Course in Miracles with people who understand the why again way of mastery work. Well, Sean, if you end up listening to this, doesn't appear to be that you're sitting in your chair there. This internet show is that place. I would be happy to entertain comments and questions about that. We have read through the Course in Miracles workbook lessons 1 year. We've done the Way of Mastery twice. We've done a variety of other books, but I have every reason to believe Michael Ryce would be thrilled to entertain questions about A Course in Miracles based on his understanding of the Cabour's manuscript and the Course in Miracles work, and all of his other, his doctorate in metaphysics and all that stuff. So I think that's it in terms of the comments in the chat room. And I'm going to resist the temptation to keep reading in Guy Finley because we're down to our last few minutes here, 5 minutes at the most. He starts the next section with, there is nothing either good or bad, but thinking makes it so, the quote from Shakespeare. So we'll get into that a little bit more tomorrow, and there will be a support group tomorrow.